Can you imagine these words? Those were the last words my father said to me before he shoved me into an October storm and locked the door behind me. Get out of my house. I don't need a sick daughter. I was 15 years old. I had no coat, no phone, no money, just a school backpack with algebra homework inside and rain already soaking through my sneakers. 4 hours later, the police called him, and when he heard what they said, his face went white as a ghost. Because whatever he thought he knew, whatever story he had convinced himself was true, collapsed in a single sentence from a stranger. But I didn't hear that sentence. Not yet. All I knew in that moment was the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, and the way the porch light threw my shadow onto the wet steps like a warning sign. My hands were already numb. My hair was plastered to my cheeks. Every breath tasted like cold metal and rainwater. Behind the door, my father didn't move. No footsteps, no second thoughts, just silence. And out in the driveway, parked like a crown jewel under the street lamp, my sister's car sat warm and dry. Ashley Reynolds always had a way of staying comfortable while someone else suffered. She was watching from the living room window. I didn't need to see her face to feel it, that quiet satisfaction she never let anyone catch. The way she could look innocent while the world burned around her, like she was just standing near the fire. I turned toward the street because I had nowhere else to turn. The neighborhood was the kind people bragged about at school. Trim hedges, porch swings, garage doors that opened like mouths and swallowed expensive cars. But at 15, in soaked sneakers, it all looked like a set built for someone else's life, a life I had just been kicked out of. Rain ran down my sleeves and collected at my fingertips. I tried flexing my hands, tried making them work. My backpack straps dug into my shoulders, and the fabric on my back felt heavier with every step, as if the storm was slowly claiming even that. I remember thinking one thing, over and over. This can't be happening. This is a misunderstanding. He'll call me back. Because no matter how tense things had been lately, no matter how sharp my father's voice had gotten when he looked at me, he was still my dad. Parents didn't do this. Not really. Not if they loved you. Not if they believed you were their kid. I was wrong about that. And I was wrong about something else, too. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. 13 years later, I was sitting in a small Boston apartment with heat that worked and windows that locked from the inside. A mug of coffee steamed beside my laptop. My life looked normal, quiet, rebuilt, stable in the way you get when you've learned to trust routines more than people. Then the mail slot clacked. One envelope slid onto the floor like it didn't know the kind of damage it carried. The paper was thick, too formal for junk mail. My name printed neatly, no smudges, no return address. I stared at it for a long time, like it might start speaking if I waited, because I hadn't spoken to my father in 13 years, not since that storm, not since the system finally stepped in and decided what my family refused to admit. When I tore the envelope open, a single page unfolded, creased once, then twice, the way someone folds a confession with shaking hands. The handwriting was unmistakable. Richard Bennett, my father, Chloe. It began. I don't know if you'll read this. I don't deserve that you do. I'm not well. They moved me into a facility. I can't stop thinking about what I did. Please, if you have any mercy left for me, come see me, before it's too late. My throat tightened like my body still remembered cold. I should have thrown it away. I should have burned it. But something inside me, a part I didn't like, a part that still wanted answers, kept reading until the end. The last line was the one that made my skin go prickly. There are things I never told the police. There are things I didn't understand until after you were gone. Please, let me explain. Let me explain. As if 13 years could be folded up like paper and smoothed out. I sat back in my chair, coffee cooling, the room too quiet. My hands didn't shake anymore the way they used to. I'd trained that out of myself, but my heart still knew the path back to that door, that deadbolt, that storm. And with the letter in my lap, a question opened inside me like a trap door. Why now? If he had something to say, something he never told the police, why wait until he was in a facility? Until he was not well? Until he needed something? Or worse, until he was scared? Because I had learned something the hard way. People don't reach out when they're comfortable. They reach out when consequences finally sit down beside them. I told myself I wasn't going. I said it out loud, to an empty room. I'm not going. Then I heard my own voice echo back, and it sounded like a lie. To understand why, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the storm, the pattern. Because what happened that night didn't start with the rain. It started with small things. Little thefts of confidence. Little edits to the story of who I was. Ashley was older than me by 2 years. Not much. But in our house, 2 years might as well have been a throne. She was the girl teachers praised. The one who smiled in photos. The one who wore neat ponytails and brought home the kind of grades that got framed and hung in the hallway. I was the other one. The one who was moody, sensitive, difficult. The one who was always asked, in that tired voice adults use when they've already decided you're the problem, "What's wrong with you, Chloe?" And I tried. God, I tried. I tried to be quieter, nicer, smaller. I tried to anticipate what my father wanted before he wanted it. I tried to earn the warmth that Ashley seemed to get for free. But Ashley didn't just receive love. She curated it. She understood something early. If you control the narrative, you control the room. And she had help. Tyler Brooks came into our lives like a charming accessory. Good-looking, confident, the kind of boy who said ma'am and shook my father's hand like he belonged there. My dad loved him immediately. Loved the idea of him. A nice boy who liked Ashley. A future that looked clean and respectable. Tyler learned fast what Ashley already knew. My father wasn't hard to manipulate. He didn't like complexity. He didn't like gray areas. He liked clean stories with clear villains. And if you handed him a villain, he didn't ask questions. He just chose. Over the months leading up to that storm, things began to disappear. Not big things. Not at first. A $20 bill from the kitchen jar. A bottle of my father's pain medication that suddenly looked lower than it should. Once, a bracelet Ashley claimed I borrowed and never returned. And every time, the same thing happened. Ashley would sigh softly and say, "Dad, I don't want to accuse her," but Tyler would frown and shake his head like he hated what he had to say. "Mr. Bennett, I've seen this kind of thing. Sometimes people act out." Then my father would look at me, as if he was trying to find the version of his daughter that fit their story. "You're lying," he'd say, before I even opened my mouth. The first time it happened, I cried. I begged. I swore I didn't take anything. Ashley wrapped an arm around my father's shoulder, like she was comforting him. "It's okay," she'd whisper. "We'll help her." Help. That word became a weapon, because help was what they used to make me sound sick. And once you label someone sick, you can do almost anything to them. The trust fund was the part no one talked about out loud. Not at dinner, not in front of neighbors, not at school. But it was always there, sitting behind the conversations like a locked drawer. My mother's family had money. Real money. The kind that comes with attorneys and paperwork and rules. When my mom died, the trust was created in my name. $55,000, set aside for my future. College. Stability. A start. I was 15, so it wasn't mine yet. It was protected. And that protection made Ashley furious in a way she could never admit. Because Ashley didn't want me to have a future she couldn't reach. She wanted what was mine. And Tyler wanted what Ashley wanted. So they did what predators do best. They looked for the soft spot. My father's fear, his anger, his need to feel in control, and they pressed it until it split. On the day of the storm, it started with a phone call. I was at school, last period. Algebra, ironically, the kind of class where your answers are either right or wrong, no matter how you feel. A staff member tapped on the classroom door and said my name. "Chloe Bennett, you're needed in the office." My stomach sank before I even stood up. In the main office, the fluorescent lights made everything look sickly. The receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. A vice principal stood with his arms folded, and there, near the wall, was my father. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscle jumped. "Come on," he said, not greeting me, not asking if I was okay. Now. In the car, he didn't speak until we were halfway home. Then he said, "Don't lie to me." "What?" My voice came out small. "They found it, Chloe." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You think I'm stupid?" "Found what?" He didn't answer. He just drove faster, the wipers squeaking against the windshield as the sky darkened. By the time we pulled into the driveway, rain had started, sharp, cold drops that looked like they wanted to hurt something. Inside, Ashley was in the living room, sitting perfectly still, like she'd been waiting for the curtain to rise. Tyler was beside her, one hand on her knee, the picture of supportive boyfriend. My father marched straight to the kitchen and opened a drawer with a kind of rage that felt rehearsed. He pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside were pills, my father's medication, and underneath it, crumpled, damp at the edges like someone had handled it with sweaty fingers, were a few bills. Cash. He held it up like evidence in a courtroom. "I knew it," he said, voice trembling. "I knew you were taking money. And now this, drugs, in my house." I stared at the bag. My mind tried to assemble it into reality and failed. "That's not mine," I said. Ashley's eyes widened, just enough to look convincing. "Chloe, please don't do this." Tyler shook his head slowly. "Man, this is bad." And my father looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. "You're sick," he said. "You need help." "No," I whispered. "You don't understand. Someone put that there." Ashley stood up and walked toward me, hands raised like she was approaching a frightened animal. "I tried to cover for you," she said softly, the performance flawless. "I really did. Cover for me." The lie landed so cleanly, I almost believed it, just because it sounded like something a good sister would say. My father's voice rose. "How long has this been going on?" "I didn't. Don't!" He slammed his palm against the counter. "Don't you dare! Do you think I don't see you? The way you act? The way you disappear into your room? The way I what?" My own voice cracked. "Do homework?" But reason didn't matter anymore. They had given him a story, and he wanted to punish the villain in it. That's when he grabbed my backpack and dumped it onto the floor. Papers, notebooks, a half-eaten granola bar, my pencil case scattering across tile. He found nothing. Of course he found nothing, because the evidence was never meant to be found on me. It was meant to be believed, and belief was the cage. He pointed at the door. "You're not staying here," he said, breath ragged. "Not like this. Not until you admit it." "I didn't do anything." My eyes burned, but I refused to cry in front of Ashley. "Please, please, Dad." But he had already moved past the part where a father listens. He grabbed my arm, dragged me toward the entryway, and shoved my wet sneakers back onto my feet like he couldn't wait to get rid of me. Then he opened the door. The storm rushed in like an animal, and he pushed me out. The door slammed. The deadbolt turned, and the porch light buzzed overhead like it was counting down my last minutes. I stood there for a second, stunned, rain stinging my face, my breath visible in the cold, and I realized something terrifying. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to remove me. And out in the street, the wind howled like it already knew where this was going. Because 4 hours later, the police would call my father, and whatever they told him would make his face go white as a ghost. But first, I had to survive the storm long enough for anyone to find me, and I didn't even know yet who would. The first mile didn't feel like a mile. It felt like a dare. Rain hit sideways, driven by wind so sharp it felt like grit on my skin. My sneakers squelched with every step, socks turning into cold rags. Cars passed with headlights smeared into white streaks by the water on my lashes, and no one slowed down long enough to see that the girl on the sidewalk wasn't walking home from a friend's house. She was being erased. I kept telling myself I had options. A friend, a neighbor, someone. But my phone was still on my bedroom desk. My father had taken it as punishment weeks earlier, the same way he'd started taking things when Ashley sighed and said, "She's acting out again." So I walked, past manicured lawns and mailboxes that shone in the streetlight, past windows glowing warm behind curtains, past families who would never know that. 10 feet from their safety, a 15-year-old was losing feeling in her hands. At first, I aimed for the one place I thought would be open, the all-night convenience store near the highway. If I could get inside, dry off, ask to use a phone, maybe call a friend's mom, maybe call the police myself, maybe prove I wasn't crazy. But the storm had other plans. Halfway there, my shivering turned into something worse, an internal stutter, like my muscles couldn't decide whether to tighten or stop. My teeth chattered so hard my jaw ached. And that's when I started to notice the way my thoughts were slowing down, like someone was dimming the lights in my brain. I remember looking at a street sign and not being able to read it. Just shapes, just blue and white. My body was still moving, but my mind was drifting. That scared me more than the cold, because cold is obvious. Hypothermia is quiet. It's your body whispering. Sleep. Just sleep. I hugged my backpack to my chest like it could keep my heart warm. It couldn't. The wind slipped under my hoodie and wrapped itself around my ribs. Every breath hurt. It felt like inhaling needles. Somewhere behind me, in a house that was no longer mine, Ashley was probably sitting on the couch, dry, warm, watching TV with Tyler. And my father was probably pacing, or maybe he wasn't pacing at all. Maybe he'd already convinced himself he'd done the right thing, because that was his talent, turning cruelty into tough love. I tried to picture his face when the police called him. What could they possibly say? Had someone found me? Had I collapsed? Had I wandered into traffic? The idea made my stomach twist. And still, I kept walking, because moving felt like the only way to stay alive. The convenience store sign finally appeared through the rain, like a lighthouse. Neon, blue, flickering. I stumbled across the parking lot, shoes dragging, water splashing up my ankles, and pushed at the glass door. Locked. A closed sign hung in the window like a joke. I pressed my forehead to the glass, breathing fog onto it, and saw the dark aisles inside, empty and cold. My reflection stared back, hair stuck to my face, cheeks pale, eyes too wide. I looked like someone in trouble, and I realized something. Even if it was open, I didn't have money. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have proof of who I was beyond a school ID in my backpack. All I had was a story, and at 15, a story doesn't protect you. I turned away and took 2 steps before the dizziness hit so hard the world tilted. I grabbed a metal pole, maybe a signpost, maybe a miracle, and held on until the spinning slowed. My hands were so cold I couldn't feel the texture anymore. That's when I heard tires, not rushing past, slowing. A car rolled into the parking lot and stopped a few yards away, headlights cutting through the rain and pinning me in place. For a second, I froze, because I'd been taught, by my father, by school assemblies, by the invisible rules girls learn early, that a strange car stopping near you at night is not safety, it's danger. The driver's door opened anyway. A figure stepped out under an umbrella, moving with purpose, not hesitation. "Hey!" a woman's voice called out over the wind. "Honey, are you okay?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My lips felt stiff, like they didn't belong to me. She came closer, umbrella tilted against the gusts, and when she reached me, she lowered it just enough for me to see her face clearly in the headlights. She was older, late 50s, maybe, gray hair pulled back, a practical coat, the kind of face that had seen enough to stop being shocked by other people's pain. Her eyes flicked over me, soaked clothes, trembling hands, bare ankles where my jeans had ridden up, and something hard settled into her expression. Not suspicion, recognition. "Oh my God," she said quietly, more to herself than to me. "You're freezing." I tried to speak. My voice came out like gravel. She stepped closer and, without asking, put a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't gentle. It was grounding, like she was anchoring me to the present. "What's your name?" she asked. I blinked at her, rain dripping off my eyelashes. "Chloe." "Chloe," she repeated, firm. "I'm Karen. Can you walk to my car?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Karen guided me toward the passenger seat, opened the door, and practically lifted me inside. The moment the heat hit my face, pain flared across my skin. Pins and needles, like my body was waking up and screaming. I gasped. Karen shut the door, ran around to the driver's side, and got in fast. She cranked the heat all the way up, then pulled a blanket from the back seat and wrapped it around me with quick, practiced movements. Not a random blanket. The kind someone keeps because they've used it before. Okay, she said, voice controlled but tight. Listen to me. You're going to keep your eyes open. You're going to talk to me. Understand? I tried. I really did. But the warmth made me want to sleep so badly I could taste it. Karen didn't let me. She reached into her glove compartment, pulled out a small flashlight, and shone it near my face. Not in my eyes. Just enough to track my focus. Chloe, where are your parents? The word parents hit like a slap. My dad, I whispered. He kicked me out. Karen's jaw tightened. Why? I swallowed. My throat hurt. He thinks I stole money. He thinks I'm on drugs. Karen went still, as if my words had clicked into a pattern she'd seen too many times. Then she asked, very softly, "Do you have any bruises?" I shook my head, or maybe I tried to. The movement felt slow. "Do you feel safe going back?" "No," I said, and that word finally came out clear. Karen looked forward through the windshield, rain streaking down the glass like tears, and I watched her face change, not with surprise, with decision. "Okay," she said, "then you're not going back tonight." A sob rose in my chest before I could stop it, half relief, half terror. "Who are you?" I managed. Karen glanced at me. "I used to work CPS," she said. "A long time. I'm not on duty, but I'm not blind, CPS." The letters made my stomach twist, because Ashley had used that word like a threat before. If you keep acting like this, people will come take you away. Now here it was, showing up in a parking lot, like fate. Karen put the car in gear. "I'm calling 911, she said, "and I'm taking you to an ER. You're showing signs of hypothermia." "No," I panicked, grabbing the blanket tighter. "If the police call my dad, he'll be angry. Karen's eyes cut to me, sharp and steady. "Chloe, listen to me. If the police call your father tonight, that's not your problem." Her voice softened, just a fraction. "That's his." I stared at her, confused and exhausted. And then she said the first thing anyone had said to me all day that felt like truth. "Something is wrong here, and it's not you." We were 5 minutes down the road when Karen's phone connected to the dispatcher on speaker. Her voice was calm, professional. Even now, "I have a minor female in my car," she said. "Found her outside in an October storm near the highway. She's soaked, shaking, and reports being kicked out of her home by her father." The dispatcher asked for location. Karen gave it, asked for my name. Karen said it again, steady. Then the dispatcher asked the question that made my blood run cold. "Does the child have a safe place to go tonight?" Karen looked at me. Not where she came from. The dispatcher's tone changed. The system was waking up, and I didn't understand it yet. But that was the moment the narrative stopped belonging to my father and my sister. It started belonging to records, to timelines, to calls logged and names spelled correctly, to people who didn't care how perfect Ashley looked in a living room window. Karen drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping her phone as if she could squeeze justice out of it. I pressed my forehead to the warm glass and watched the streetlights blur. My body was still shaking, but my mind was starting to clear, and with clarity came terror. If the police showed up at my house, Ashley would cry, Tyler would look concerned, my father would say he was just trying to help, and I, soaked, shivering, disoriented, I would look exactly like the story they'd been telling. A troubled girl, a problem, a liar. Karen must have read my face, because she reached over and squeezed my shoulder again, that grounding pressure. "Chloe," she said quietly, "I want you to answer me honestly. Have you taken anything tonight? Drugs, alcohol, anything at all?" "No," I said immediately. "No." "I swear." Karen nodded like she believed me, which almost hurt, because I wasn't used to it. "Good," she said, "because if you're telling the truth, then someone is trying very hard to make you look like you're not." My heart thudded. "Why would they do that?" I whispered. Karen's eyes stayed on the road. "Money," she said simply. "Control." Sometimes both. And in that moment, as the car cut through the storm toward the bright white lights of the hospital, a new open loop snapped into place in my mind. Ashley wanted something big enough to risk my life. I just didn't know what it was yet. But Karen did, or she was starting to, because the way she said money wasn't a guess. It was a memory. At the ER, everything moved fast. Warm blankets, a nurse with kind eyes, a thermometer, blood pressure cuffs squeezing my arm. Karen never left my side. When the triage nurse asked, "Where's her parent or guardian?" Karen said, without flinching, "Not here, and that's part of the problem." They put me under a heat lamp. They gave me warmed fluids. My fingers burned as sensation returned, and I cried silently into the blanket because pain meant I was still alive. A police officer arrived, female, mid-30s, hair tucked under her cap, rainwater dripping off her shoulders. She introduced herself to Karen first. "Officer Dana Ruiz," she said. Karen spoke to her in a low voice that made my stomach tighten. Not gossip, not drama, facts, timeline. Found her at approximately 9:40 p.m. near the highway convenience store. She reports being expelled from home by father. No phone, no coat. Temperature outside is... Karen glanced at her watch. 38 degrees and dropping with wind. Officer Ruiz's expression hardened. Then she walked over to my bed, crouched so we were at eye level, and said, "Chloe, I'm going to ask you some questions. You're not in trouble. Do you understand?" I nodded, throat tight. Officer Ruiz pulled out a small notebook. "Tell me what happened, from the start." And as I opened my mouth, I realized something terrifying. If I told it wrong, if I forgot a detail, if I sounded emotional, if my voice shook too much, Ashley's story would win, because the first version of events is the one people remember. Karen leaned closer, her voice like a steady rail. "Just tell the truth," she whispered. "Slow, one thing at a time." I started, and while I spoke, Officer Ruiz wrote down every word. A record, a timestamp, a chain beginning to form. Karen stepped out into the hallway with Officer Ruiz after my statement. I could still hear fragments through the curtain. "Father's name?" the officer asked. "Richard Bennett," Karen answered. "Address?" Karen gave it. "We'll send a unit." My stomach flipped. A unit. A police car at my house. Ashley opening the door with wide eyes and trembling hands. My father standing behind her, furious, already crafting his explanation. And then, like thunder you feel before you hear, it hit me. This is the moment. This is when the police call him. This is when he hears something that turns his face white as a ghost. But what? Did they find something? Did they find me? Or were they about to find something far worse inside that house? I lay back against the pillow, heart pounding, and stared at the hospital ceiling tiles. Because out there, in the rain, a squad car was heading toward my front door, and whatever happened next would decide whether I was a troubled kid or a victim. And for the first time since the deadbolt clicked, I felt something unfamiliar rise under my ribs. Not hope, not yet. Something sharper, the sense that the story was about to flip. I didn't see my father's face when the police called him, but I can still picture it. Because I know that kind of fear now. The kind that drains the color from a person when the narrative they've been living inside suddenly collapses. Officer Dana Ruiz returned to my ER bay about 20 minutes later. Her rain-soaked uniform had darkened at the shoulders, and there was a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there when she first arrived. Karen Holloway stood beside her, arms folded, eyes sharp. Ruiz crouched again, so we were level. "Chloe," she said, "I need you to listen carefully." My stomach clenched. Did you talk to my dad?" Ruiz's gaze flicked to Karen for a split second, then back to me. "We called the residence," she said. "Your father answered." A cold wave rolled through me, even under warm blankets. "And," my voice sounded smaller than I wanted. Ruiz chose her words like she was stepping around broken glass. "He said you ran away. He said you've been acting out and stealing money. He said he was afraid you were using drugs." Karen made a low sound, half scoff, half growl. Ruiz continued, "But he also said something else." I held my breath. "He said you were never outside." My heart stopped for a second. "What?" Ruiz nodded once. "He said you left hours ago, that you weren't kicked out, that you stormed out and refused to come back." Karen leaned in, voice quiet but firm. "That's the first inconsistency. Inconsistency. The word didn't sound like drama. It sounded like the beginning of a case file. Ruiz looked down at her notes. I asked him what you were wearing when you left. I swallowed. My lips were still cracked from the cold. Okay. He hesitated, Ruiz said. Then he guessed. He said you had a coat. I stared at her. I did not have a coat, I whispered. Ruiz's eyes stayed steady. I know. Karen's jaw tightened. And when people lie about small details, it's usually because the big detail is worse. I felt something in my chest twist, anger, maybe, or grief, or the terrifying realization that my father had chosen, on the phone with police, to double down on the version of events Ashley and Tyler had fed him. Officer Ruiz stood. We have a unit at your house right now, she said. They're speaking to him in person. My pulse hammered. Ashley is there. Ruiz's expression didn't change. We know. We're speaking to everyone. Everyone. That meant Ashley's mask would be tested. Tyler's smooth concern. My father's righteous anger. And me, alone in a hospital bed, wrapped in blankets, trying not to shake. Karen placed a hand on the rail of my bed and lowered her voice. Chloe, I want you to understand something. You don't have to convince me. You don't have to convince Officer Ruiz. The storm did that for you. I blinked at her. Karen nodded toward my hands, still pink from rewarming. Your body is evidence. Your clothing is evidence. The temperature outside is evidence. Your father saying you had a coat when you didn't? That's evidence. I let out a shaky breath, and for the first time since the front door slammed, I started to believe a dangerous thought. What if the truth actually had teeth? A nurse brought in a paper bag with my soaked clothes sealed inside, labeled with my name and a time. A timestamp. It hit me then how quickly life becomes official when you enter the system. The nurse asked Karen a question, quietly, respectfully. Is there a safe guardian? Karen answered just as quietly. Not in that home. The nurse nodded as if she understood completely, and walked away. Officer Ruiz returned again, this time with her radio clipped close, voice lowered. Chloe, she said, your father is insisting you're a danger to yourself. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means, Karen cut in, he's trying to put you in a box where they don't have to listen to you. Ruiz nodded. He told our unit he wants you taken for evaluation. He used the words unstable and addict. My mouth went dry. But I'm not. I know, Ruiz said. But I need you to answer my question carefully. Have you ever been diagnosed with anything? Anxiety, depression, anything like that? I shook my head. No, nothing. Karen's voice softened. And even if you had, it wouldn't justify what happened. Ruiz looked at Karen, then back to me. Okay, she said, because what he's pushing for could complicate where you go tonight, where I go tonight. The words made me realize I hadn't thought beyond the hospital. I couldn't go home, but I also couldn't just disappear into Karen's car. Not legally, not safely, not with my father ready to brand me as a runaway. Karen leaned closer to me. CPS will get involved, she said. I know that sounds scary, but it's not always what people think. Sometimes it's the only way to stop adults from doing damage behind closed doors. My throat tightened. Ashley said CPS would take me away. Karen's eyes sharpened. Ashley said that to control you. She looked toward Officer Ruiz. If your unit is smart, they're not just listening to the loudest adult in the room. Ruiz's mouth tightened. They're not. Then her radio crackled. She listened, eyes narrowing, and something shifted in her posture, like she'd just heard the first real crack in the wall. Ruiz pressed the radio closer, responded briefly, then turned back to us. Okay, she said, voice controlled. Here's what's happening. My heart pounded. What did they find? Ruiz paused. At the house. They located the plastic bag your father mentioned, the pills and the cash. My skin went cold again. Okay. And, Ruiz continued, your father said he found it in your backpack. Karen's head snapped up. But we have her backpack here. I looked down at the bag by my bed, my algebra notebook still inside, my pencil case, my homework. Ruiz nodded. Exactly. Our unit asked to see your backpack. My throat tightened. What did my dad say? Ruiz's eyes locked on mine. He said you took it when you left. Karen's voice was like steel. And that's impossible, because she still has it, with her. In this hospital. Logged. Logged. Time-stamped. I could almost hear the chain clicking into place. Ruiz continued. When our unit pointed that out, your father changed his story. He said, maybe you hid the bag somewhere else. Karen let out a short, bitter laugh. Classic. Move the goalposts. I stared at them. So, he lied. Ruiz didn't soften it. Yes. And in that single word, yes, I felt something inside me ignite. Not relief, not victory, but a hard, bright anger that finally had somewhere to go. Because my father wasn't just mistaken. He wasn't just manipulated. He was choosing to protect Ashley's story, even when reality contradicted it. And that meant the only way out was through the truth, the kind that leaves marks on paper. Karen asked Ruiz if she could speak to me alone for a moment. Ruiz stepped out, and Karen pulled a chair close to my bed. Her face softened, but her voice stayed firm. Chloe, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer, even if it feels ugly. I swallowed. Okay, your sister, Karen said. Has she ever taken things from you before? Money, jewelry, anything that disappeared and then showed up in her room? I hesitated, because in my family, saying anything bad about Ashley was like committing a crime. But Karen's eyes didn't move, so I told the truth. Yeah, I whispered, all the time. But she always had an explanation, or she'd cry, or Dad would say I was jealous. Karen nodded slowly, like she was filing it away. And your father, does he manage your trust fund paperwork? My stomach tightened. He talks about it. He knows where the documents are. He says it's family money because Mom's gone. Karen's expression tightened at the edges. It's not family money if it's in your name. I blinked. Why are you asking about the trust? Karen leaned in. Because people don't go to this level for nothing. They don't risk police involvement, CPS involvement, hospital involvement, unless there's something on the other side worth taking. My breath caught. Ashley doesn't even talk about it. Karen's mouth twisted. That doesn't mean she isn't thinking about it. She paused, letting her next words land with weight. And Chloe, if they're pushing the drug addict story, that suggests they want you labeled unfit, unstable, a risk. Because if you're a risk, adults can petition for control. Control. The word made my skin crawl. Control of what? I asked, even though I already knew. Karen said it anyway. Control of you. Control of your money. Control of the narrative. I stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe. A new question opened in my mind, another open loop, sharper than the last. If Ashley and Tyler were setting me up, how far had they already gone? When Officer Ruiz returned, she brought someone else with her, a woman in a plain blazer, hair pulled back, a folder in her hands. This is Ms. Parker, Ruiz said. Elise Parker. She's here as an emergency advocate for minors. She's going to help make sure your voice is heard tonight. Elise Parker smiled gently. Not warm exactly, professional, careful, but when she spoke, her voice was steady in a way that made my chest loosen. Hi, Chloe, she said. I'm not here to interrogate you. I'm here to protect your rights. Do you understand what that means? I shook my head slightly. It means, she said, you're not going back into a home tonight if it isn't safe. And it means we document everything. Document, record, timeline. The words were becoming my lifeline. Elise flipped open her folder. Officer Ruiz told me you were accused of stealing cash and medication. Yes, I whispered. And you were expelled during severe weather, she continued. I see the nurse's notes on your condition. That matters. Karen stood beside her, arms folded like a sentry. Elise asked, Chloe, has your father ever tried to have you evaluated against your will before? I hesitated. He threatened it. When Ashley said I was out of control, Elise's eyes narrowed slightly. Okay, we'll note that. Officer Ruiz's radio crackled again. She listened. And then she said, almost under her breath, there it is. Karen's head lifted. What? Ruiz looked at Elise, then at me. Our unit spoke to your sister and her boyfriend, she said. They're sticking to the story, but my heart pounded. But what? Ruiz's mouth tightened. Tyler claimed he saw you take the pills and cash out of your father's drawer tonight. Karen's eyes flashed. He claims he witnessed it. Ruiz nodded. Yes, Elise's voice turned precise. And what time did he say he saw that? Ruiz glanced at her notes. He said around 8:30. Karen's gaze cut to me. Chloe, what time did your father shove you out? I swallowed. It was right after we got home from school. Maybe 6:30? Elise's eyes sharpened. If Tyler claims he saw something at 8:30, but you were already outside for hours, Ruiz nodded. Exactly. Karen's smile was thin, grim. He just gave us a timestamp. A timestamp. A crack in Tyler's smooth mask. And I felt my pulse shift from panic to something else. Something like momentum. Because the system didn't care how convincing Tyler sounded. It cared about clocks. That was when Karen looked at me. And I realized something terrifying and hopeful at the same time. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were building a case. Karen's hand rested on the bed rail again. Chloe, she said softly, I know you're exhausted, but this is important. I need you to remember details, times, words, anything you can. My throat tightened. Why? Karen's voice was calm, but the meaning was huge. Because tonight is the first night the truth has a witness. And once you have witnesses, you can get records. And once you have records, Elise finished it, you can get justice. Officer Ruiz nodded once, and her eyes met mine with something like respect. Your father's story is already changing, she said. That's not good for him. I wanted to feel victorious, but all I felt was the ache of betrayal, because the man who should have protected me was now the loudest voice calling me sick. And somewhere in my house, Ashley was probably crying on cue, telling everyone she was so worried, while Tyler played the supportive hero. I could almost hear Ashley's voice. I just want my sister to get help. And that's when a terrifying thought hit me, one that made my stomach clench. What if help was their endgame? What if the whole point was to get me locked somewhere I couldn't fight back? Karen seemed to read it on my face. She leaned in and said, very quietly, we're not letting them institutionalize you based on a lie. Then she looked at Officer Ruiz. What's our next step? Ruiz exhaled. CPS intake is en route, and the unit is securing the house for anything relevant. Elise closed her folder softly. Then we prepare for the next 48 hours, she said. Because once CPS is involved, everything becomes official. Official records, timelines, and somewhere inside my chest, underneath fear and exhaustion, that hard anger sharpened into something new, resolve. Because if they were going to make me a case, I was going to make sure the case told the truth, and the truth was about to get its first real ally inside that house. Something my sister didn't expect. Something small, something with a timestamp, something that would lead, step by step, to the moment my father's face went white as a ghost. CPS arrived at the hospital just after midnight, not with sirens, not with drama, with a clipboard, a quiet voice, and a kind of calm that told me this wasn't their first child pulled out of a storm. Her name was Marissa Grant, early 40s, hair in a tight bun, practical shoes, the kind of woman who looked like she kept tissues in her pocket and boundaries in her spine. She introduced herself to Karen first, then to Officer Ruiz and Elise Parker, and only then did she turn to me. Chloe Bennett, she asked gently. I nodded, clutching the blanket around my shoulders like armor. Marissa pulled a chair beside my bed and sat low, so she wasn't towering over me. I'm not here to punish you, she said. I'm here to understand what happened and make sure you're safe tonight. Do you feel safe with your father? No, I said immediately, voice hoarse. Marissa's pen moved, quiet scratches on paper, the sound of something becoming official. Do you feel safe with your sister? I hesitated. The room felt suddenly too bright. No, Marissa paused. Okay, thank you for being honest. She didn't ask it like a trap. She asked it like information. Elise leaned in slightly. We have a developing timeline inconsistency from the residents, she said, measured and professional, and the minor presented with symptoms consistent with prolonged exposure. Marissa nodded. I've read the nurse's notes. She looked back at me. Chloe, I'm going to ask you to walk me through tonight step by step, not because I don't believe you, because details matter. The system runs on details. Details. It was the first time anyone said that out loud in a way that made sense. So I started from the school office. The car ride home, the bag of pills and cash, the way Ashley's eyes widened just enough to look innocent, Tyler's slow head shake, my father's rage, the door, the deadbolt. I told her about the convenience store sign and the locked door, about nearly passing out, about Karen's headlights cutting through the rain like a spotlight. When I finished, I realized my hands were trembling again, not from cold this time, but from reliving the moment my father pointed to the door and told me I wasn't his problem anymore. Marissa didn't flinch. She just wrote. Then she looked up and asked, "Did your father hit you?" "No," I whispered. "Did he restrain you?" "He grabbed my arm," I said. "Hard. He shoved me." Marissa's jaw tightened. "Okay." She glanced at Karen. "And you found her at approximately 9:40 p.m., Karen said instantly. "Near the highway convenience store, soaked, shaking, disoriented. She had no coat, no phone, backpack in her possession." Marissa wrote that down too, then looked at Officer Ruiz. "Your unit confirmed the resident's story is shifting." Ruiz nodded. "Multiple inconsistencies. Father said she had a coat, then changed his account. Tyler claims he witnessed a theft at 8:30 p.m., which doesn't align with her being expelled hours earlier." Marissa's pen paused at the word 8:30, like it had weight. "Thank you," she said. Then she turned back to me, and her voice softened. "Chloe, I'm going to make a decision tonight that affects where you sleep. And I need you to know something. A decision to remove you from the home is not a judgment on you. It's a judgment on the adult's ability to keep you safe." My throat tightened. "Where would I go?" Marissa's eyes held mine. "First, we need to make sure you have a safe placement. A relative, a friend's family." I shook my head slowly. "My mom's family is not really around. My dad, he cut them off." Karen's gaze sharpened. "That's important." Marissa nodded. "Okay, then we'll do emergency placement. It can be temporary, but tonight you are not returning to that house." The relief that hit me was so strong it almost made me dizzy. Then the fear followed right behind it. If I wasn't going home, what would my father do next? And what would Ashley do when she realized she hadn't won cleanly? It was about 10 minutes later when Officer Ruiz's phone buzzed with a call from the unit at my house. She stepped aside, listened, and the muscles in her face tightened again, like the story was about to take a turn. When she came back, Karen's eyes were already asking the question. Ruiz didn't waste time. "They found something," she said. My heart leapt. "What?" Ruiz looked at Elise and Marissa first. "In Ashley's bedroom. In a drawer." Karen's voice went low. "Say it." Ruiz exhaled. "A prepaid phone. A burner." The word hit the room like a match striking. Karen's eyes flashed. Elise's posture straightened. Marissa's pen hovered above the paper. My stomach dropped. "A phone." Ruiz nodded. "Not registered to your father. No family plan. Prepaid device. Power was on. Our unit found it because Tyler got nervous and started cleaning up while they were there." Karen let out a slow breath. He couldn't help himself. Elise's voice became razor sharp. "Was it unlocked?" Ruiz nodded once. "It was." I felt my pulse in my throat. "What does that mean?" Karen leaned closer, eyes locked on mine. "It means we might finally see what they said when they thought no one would ever hear it." Marissa looked at Ruiz. "Did the unit preserve it properly?" Ruiz nodded. "They bagged it. Photos. Chain of custody. Chain of custody." I didn't fully understand it then, but I understood the feeling. A door had opened. A new open loop snapped into place. Loop 3. The smoking gun Karen had promised. Because a burner phone doesn't exist in a happy household. A burner phone exists when someone is hiding communication. And hiding communication is how conspiracies breathe. I didn't sleep that night. They moved me from the ER to a small observation room while CPS arranged placement. The hospital was quiet in that way that makes every sound too loud. Wheels on linoleum, distant intercom pages, the soft beep of monitors from other rooms. Karen stayed until CPS made her leave. She pressed a card into my hand before she went. Her name, her number. "You call me if anyone makes you feel small," she said. "You hear me?" I nodded, tears burning my eyes. Then she squeezed my shoulder, the same grounding touch, and walked out. And that was when it hit me. This woman, this stranger, had done more for me in one night than my own father had done in months. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after she left. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the door slamming. I heard the deadbolt, and I pictured Ashley's face at the window, soft, innocent, satisfied, around 2:40 a.m. me. Marissa returned with paperwork. "You're going to a temporary placement," she said gently. "It's a certified home. You'll have food, warmth, supervision. Tomorrow, we'll do a more complete intake and start the formal process." Formal process. The word sounded like distance, like I was being moved into a different universe. I swallowed. "What about my dad?" Marissa's gaze didn't soften. "Your father will be interviewed again tomorrow. So will Ashley and Tyler. And based on what we've seen tonight," she paused, and I held my breath. "This is not going away. Not going away." I wanted to believe her, but I knew Ashley. Ashley didn't lose gracefully. Ashley didn't lose at all. If she could help it, she would cry. She would perform. She would twist things until I looked unstable again. And she had Tyler, smooth, confident Tyler, ready to back her up. Then I remembered the burner phone, and the way Officer Ruiz's face had changed when she said it. Evidence doesn't care about performance. Evidence cares about what you did when you thought no one was watching. The placement home was quiet, too quiet. A woman with tired eyes and a soft voice greeted me at the door, handed me a towel, and pointed me toward a small bedroom with a twin bed and a lamp that cast a warm circle of light. I showered until my skin stung, trying to wash off the storm, the humiliation, the smell of wet sidewalk, and fear. I put on borrowed pajamas and sat on the bed, hair dripping, staring at my hands. They looked normal now, but I didn't feel normal. Because somewhere across town, in the house I'd been expelled from, Ashley and Tyler were probably lying in bed, planning their next move, and my father was probably furious. Not because he'd nearly killed his daughter in an October storm, because the system had gotten involved, because strangers were asking questions, because the story was slipping out of his control. By morning, the investigation began in earnest. And that's when Karen's instincts would start paying off, because they weren't just going to ask, who kicked Chloe out? They were going to ask, who planted the evidence, who benefited, and what had they already tried to set into motion behind the scenes, papers signed, accounts accessed, calls made, that I hadn't even discovered yet? The next day, at CPS intake, Marissa sat me down with another folder and a calm voice. "We're going to gather records," she said. "School attendance, medical history, pharmacy logs, your father's reports, any financial concerns." Financial. The word made my stomach twist. I stared at her. "My trust fund." Marissa's eyes didn't flicker. "Yes, that too." I felt something tighten in my chest, because until that moment, the trust fund had been a shadow, something adults mentioned in whispers. Now it was stepping into the light. Marissa looked at Elise Parker, who had joined us again, and Elise's voice was precise. "Chloe," she said, "do you know where your trust documents are kept?" I hesitated. "In my dad's office. Top drawer. He has a file cabinet." Elise nodded, already thinking 3 steps ahead. "And has anyone ever asked you to sign anything? Anything you didn't understand?" My throat went dry, because suddenly I remembered something. Small, almost nothing. A paper Ashley had shoved at me weeks ago, laughing like it was a joke. "Sign this, Chloe. It's for Mom's old stuff. Dad wants it organized." I'd refused. Ashley had rolled her eyes and said, "God, you make everything difficult." At the time, it had felt like nothing. Now it felt like a test, a trap they hadn't sprung yet. I looked up at Elise, my voice barely audible. "There was a paper," I whispered. "I didn't sign it." Elise's gaze sharpened. "Do you remember what it said?" I swallowed, thinking hard. It had legal words. Something about authorization, something about medical. I don't know. Karen's voice echoed in my mind. Money, control, sometimes both. Elise closed her folder slowly, like she didn't want to scare me with how serious it was. But her next words landed like a hammer. "If they were trying to label you unstable and get you placed somewhere you couldn't object, then paperwork becomes very dangerous." My pulse thundered. Because now the case wasn't just about being kicked out. It was about what they were trying to do after. And the burner phone, Ashley's burner phone, was the first proof that they had been coordinating it, planning it, timing it. And soon, very soon, someone would read what was on that phone. And when they did, we'd finally understand what the police said to my father that night. The sentence that turned his face white as a ghost. 2 days after the storm, I sat in a small CPS interview room that smelled like coffee and copier paper. Not a scary room, a bland room, the kind designed to make people tell the truth because there's nothing else to focus on. Marissa Grant sat across from me with her clipboard. Elise Parker sat slightly to my right, calm and steady. Officer Dana Ruiz stood near the door, arms folded, listening like she'd learned to hear lies before they were spoken. And Karen Holloway. Karen had come back, not because she had to, but because she'd decided I mattered. She sat in the corner, quiet, eyes sharp, a witness to my reality. Marissa looked at me gently. "Chloe, we're going to go step by step through what we have so far," she said, "and then we're going to talk about what we need next." I nodded, throat tight. Marissa flipped a page. We confirmed weather records, temperature, wind, rainfall. That supports your medical presentation. We pulled your school attendance and the timestamp when you were called to the office. The vice principal corroborates that your father arrived and took you out of class. Facts. Time. Paper. It felt strange, like my life was turning into documents, and somehow that made it safer. Officer Ruiz added, "Your father's statement is inconsistent across 2 interviews. He changed the sequence of events twice." Karen's mouth tightened. "Because he's repeating someone else's script." Marissa glanced at Karen, then back to me. "We also spoke to your father about the trust." My stomach dropped. "What did he say?" Marissa's expression stayed neutral, but her words were careful. "He said the trust is family money. He said he's been managing it because you're a minor." Elise's voice was quiet but firm. "It's not family money if it's in Chloe's name." Marissa nodded. "Correct. And we asked him if he's taken any steps to access it." My heartbeat thudded. "And," Marissa took a breath, "he said no." Karen leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. "That's an answer that needs verification." Marissa's pen tapped the page once. "Exactly." Then Marissa's eyes met mine. "Chloe, I want to be clear. We are not assuming your father is a criminal, but we are also not assuming he is telling the truth." I swallowed hard, because the part that hurt wasn't the investigation. The part that hurt was realizing strangers were doing what my father should have done, questioning before condemning. Officer Ruiz stepped out briefly and returned with an evidence bag on the table. Inside, sealed and labeled, was the prepaid phone, the burner. My chest tightened as if the object itself radiated danger. Marissa spoke first. "This device was found in Ashley Reynolds' bedroom. It was unlocked. The unit photographed the screen and bagged the device according to procedure." Elise's gaze sharpened. "We requested a forensic download." Officer Ruiz nodded. "Tech is already extracting texts, call logs, and timestamps." Timestamps. Karen's eyes gleamed faintly. The truth's favorite language. I stared at the bag. What if there's nothing on it? Karen looked at me, voice steady. "People don't buy burners for nothing, Chloe." Elise added, "Even if the messages are deleted, metadata often remains, and deleted messages can sometimes be recovered." My stomach flipped. Marissa slid another document across the table, an ER report with my temperature, notes about confusion, shivering, skin response. "Medical documentation," she said, tapping it lightly. "And this," she added, pulling another sheet, a photo, a grainy screenshot from a body cam. My father's front door at night, lit by the porch light, and in the frame, Ashley, wrapped in a robe, hair down, face arranged into concern. Tyler behind her, arms crossed. Karen's voice was almost a whisper. "There's the mask." Officer Ruiz spoke evenly. "Our unit asked Tyler to repeat his statement about seeing you take the pills and cash at 8:30 p.m. He repeated it. Elise's eyes were cold, even though she was already out of the house. Marissa nodded. "Correct, and that's why we're building the procedural chain." I blinked. "What does that mean exactly?" Karen leaned in. Gentle now. It means we climb, step by step, not with feelings, with proof, so I could see her notes. 1. Inconsistency. Who kicked you out and when? 2. Record. School timestamp plus hospital intake time. 3. Camera. Body cam at the house. Plus hospital surveillance if needed. 4. Tracking. Phone logs, prepaid purchase trail, ATM footage. 5. Witness. Vice principal, nurse, Karen, responding officers. 6. Smoking gun. The burner texts, coordination, motive, plan. Seeing it written like that made me feel both safe and sick, because the truth wasn't going to come out in a single dramatic moment. It was going to come out like a staircase, and we were only on the first step. That afternoon, I was allowed to return to my school briefly, with a CPS escort, to retrieve my books and meet with the vice principal. Walking back into that building felt surreal. The same hallway, the same posters about college and kindness and anti-bullying, and yet my whole life had shifted. Vice Principal Hartley met us in his office, face tight with concern. He looked older than I remembered, like my disappearance had cost him sleep. "Chloe," he said softly, "I'm glad you're alive." Alive. The word hit me harder than anything else. He cleared his throat. "The night your father took you, he was angry. He said some things." Marissa sat with pen poised. "What things?" Hartley hesitated. "He said you were poisoning the family, that you were a thief. He said Ashley had been trying to help you." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Convenient." Hartley nodded slowly. "Then, the next morning, Ashley came to school." My stomach tightened. "She did?" Hartley glanced at Marissa. "Yes. She asked me to sign a form." Elise's head snapped up. "What form?" Hartley opened a drawer and pulled out a copy. "It was a release. She said it was for Chloe's medical information because the hospital needed it." My mouth went dry. Elise took the paper and scanned it quickly, her face tightening. "This is not a standard hospital release," she said quietly. "This is an authorization that could be used to access records broadly." Karen's voice went low. "Or build a case for unfitness." Marissa's pen scratched across the page. "Did you sign it?" Hartley shook his head. "No. Something felt wrong. She got upset." I felt my pulse in my throat. "What did she say?" Hartley's mouth tightened. "She said, 'Fine, we'll get it another way.'" Another way. It sounded like a door slamming. Elise folded the paper carefully. "This matters," she said. Marissa looked at me, voice gentle. "Chloe, do you understand what this means?" I swallowed. "It means she was trying to get access to my records, to make me look unstable." Karen nodded once. "And she did it while you were fighting for your life." I stared at my hands. The storm was already over, but something inside me still felt freezing. Because now I could see the shape of it. Ashley and Tyler weren't reacting to the situation. They were steering it. And the trust fund, the $55,000, was no longer a shadow. It was the reason. Back at the CPS office, Officer Ruiz rejoined us with an update. Her face was controlled, but her eyes had that look again, the look she'd had when she said, "There it is." "Tech pulled initial data from the burner," she said. My heart slammed against my ribs. "What did they find?" Ruiz placed a printed sheet on the table, not the whole thread, just a summary of log entries. Elise read quickly. Marissa's pen hovered. Karen didn't move at all. I leaned forward, breath shallow, and saw what made Elise's jaw tighten. Multiple outgoing texts to a contact saved as T, time-stamped, night of the storm, and earlier weeks too. Elise looked up. "T for Tyler," she said. Officer Ruiz nodded. "Likely." Karen's voice was almost calm. "Read the timestamps." Ruiz tapped the page. First relevant message, 6:12 p.m. My stomach clenched. That was around the time my father shoved me out. Ruiz continued. Then 7:03 p.m., then 8:21 p.m., then 8:36 p.m., 8:36. Tyler's claim had been 8:30. Karen's eyes flashed. They were coordinating while he was claiming he witnessed something. Marissa's voice was quiet but firm. "Do we have content yet?" Ruiz nodded. "We do. Limited, but enough to show intent." Elise held up a hand. "Careful," she said. "We need to preserve full context." Ruiz nodded again, then looked at me. "Chloe," she said, "I'm going to paraphrase the content because the forensic report isn't finalized, but I need you to understand what we're seeing." My mouth went dry. "Okay." Ruiz took a breath. "The messages reference you being out tonight. They reference the bag and making sure he believes it. They reference CPS like it's part of the plan, not an accident." My skin went ice cold. Karen's voice went soft, deadly. "There it is." Marissa's pen scratched hard. Elise's eyes narrowed into something fierce. And then Ruiz said the line that made my stomach drop through the floor. "They reference your trust fund." The room went silent. I could hear my own breathing. Elise spoke first, voice low. "Do they mention an amount?" Ruiz nodded once. "Yes." Karen closed her eyes briefly, like she'd already known. Marissa's voice was calm, but her hands weren't. 55,000. I stared at the table, because now the motive wasn't a theory. It was in their own words, on their own phone, with their own timestamps. And the best part, the part that would make my father's face go white as a ghost, was still ahead. Because if they mentioned the trust fund, then they probably mentioned what they planned to do next, how they planned to access it, who they planned to blame. And that meant the smoking gun wasn't just about the storm, it was about the whole machine they'd built to swallow me. Karen leaned toward me, her voice gentle but unbreakable. "Chloe," she said, "this is where the case starts turning." My throat tightened. "What happens now?" Elise answered. "Precise. Now we escalate. We pull ATM footage. We pull pharmacy logs. We pull purchase records for the burner. We lock down the trust fund administratively. And then we confront them with a sequence they can't talk their way out of." Officer Ruiz nodded. "And when your father hears what was on that phone," she paused, looking at me, "that's when his face goes white. Because the police hadn't called him that night to tell him I was alive. They called him to tell him something else, something he couldn't explain away. And in the next phase of the investigation, we were going to find out exactly what that was. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see everything. Thank you so much for your support. After Officer Ruiz told us what was on that burner, the air in the room changed. Up until then, everything had felt like a fight between stories. My father's story, Ashley's story, my story. Whoever sounded the most believable, whoever cried at the right moment, whoever looked the most concerned in the right lighting. But a burner phone doesn't care about lighting. A burner phone cares about timestamps. And once the word trust showed up in Ashley's messages, Elise Parker stopped treating this like a family misunderstanding. She treated it like an extraction, a clean, step-by-step removal of lies from the truth. Elise laid out the next 48 hours like a checklist. "We're going to lock down the money," she said first. "Then we're going to build the chain." Marissa Grant nodded. "CPS can request an emergency financial safeguard. If the trust is in Chloe's name, we can notify the trustee or the managing institution." My stomach tightened. "Trustee, like a bank?" Elise nodded. "It depends on how it was set up. But yes, there's usually a custodian. And if there isn't, we still document risk and file for protective measures." Karen's eyes were sharp. "You freeze the prize so predators stop circling." Officer Ruiz added, "And we keep every adult from quietly fixing the evidence." That word, fixing, made my skin crawl, because I could already picture Ashley at home, smiling through clenched teeth, deleting messages, shredding papers, crying to my dad about how unfair this all was. But Officer Ruiz was ahead of her. She was already pulling records, and records are harder to cry over. Step 1. The trust fund goes on alert. Elise made a call in front of me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize it. She spoke like someone moving chess pieces. Minor child. Potential financial exploitation. Evidence of coordination. Requesting immediate administrative hold, pending review. I listened to the voice on the other end, ask for identifying information. My full name, date of birth, the name of my mother's family. Hearing my mother's name in that cold, procedural context made my throat tighten. Because my mom was gone, and her money was supposed to protect me. Instead, it had become bait. When Elise hung up, she looked at me. "They can't touch it right now. she said. Not without triggering an investigation. Karen exhaled through her nose. Good. I should have felt relief, but what I felt was rage, because the fact that we had to freeze something meant Ashley had already reached for it, and that meant the next question was obvious. How far had she gone before the storm? Step 2. The ATM footage. Officer Ruiz requested the ATM footage tied to the missing cash story. My father had claimed money was disappearing. Ashley had cried about it. Tyler had looked solemn. Now the system asked a simple question. Where did the money actually go? The bank produced a log, dates, times, amounts. And then, because there are cameras everywhere now, they produced video. We watched it in a small room at the station, not on a big screen like in movies. On a monitor with a time code in the corner and grainy night vision. The image was shaky at first, then steady, and there she was, Ashley, hair down, hood up, standing at the ATM with the posture of someone who believed she'd never be caught. She inserted a card, typed a PIN, and withdrew cash with a quick, practiced motion. The timestamp glowed in the corner. It wasn't one withdrawal. It was a pattern. Multiple dates, multiple times. Always in small chunks, enough to disappear slowly, enough that my father could blame a troubled kid instead of noticing a thief living in his own house. My stomach turned. Karen didn't even blink. There's your step 3, she said quietly. Camera, timestamp, identity. Elise's voice stayed controlled. We'll subpoena the full set. We'll match it to deposit records and cardholder information. Officer Ruiz paused the footage on Ashley's face. My sister looked so normal. That was the worst part. Not monstrous, not obviously evil, just comfortable. And in that frozen frame, I saw the truth I'd spent years refusing to name. Ashley didn't hate me. She used me. Step 3, the pharmacy logs. Next came the medication, the pills my father had held up like a verdict. If those pills were mine, then someone had to obtain them. Someone had to handle them. Someone had to move them. Officer Ruiz pulled pharmacy logs and asked a basic question. Who filled my father's prescription? Who picked it up? The answer landed like a brick. Tyler Brooks. His name appeared in the pickup record. Date, time, signature. Elise's finger traced the line. He had access, she said. Karen's eyes narrowed. And he needed access to plant. My breath came short. My dad let Tyler pick up his meds. Officer Ruiz nodded. Your father said Tyler helps the family. Helps the family. The phrase sounded different now, like a disguise for a key. The pharmacy also had surveillance footage, not as clear as the ATM, but clear enough. Tyler at the counter. Tyler signing. Tyler accepting the bag with the casual confidence of someone who believed he belonged inside our lives. He didn't glance at the camera, because he didn't think he had to. Borsi, step 4, the receipt trail. Burners aren't just communication, they're purchases. Where did it come from? Officer Ruiz tracked the prepaid phone's serial number to the point of sale, the same convenience store I'd stumbled to in the storm. That detail made my stomach twist so hard I had to grip the edge of the chair, because it meant Ashley's burner wasn't an abstract crime tool. It came from the exact place where I almost collapsed. And the purchase timestamp. 2 weeks before the storm, not a last-minute reaction, a plan. The clerk remembered Tyler, too. Nice kid, she said, when Officer Ruiz interviewed her. Polite, bought the phone and a top-up card. Cash. Cash. The same cash my father claimed I stole. Elise's eyes were ice. They funded the burner with money they were already siphoning, she said. Karen's voice was low. That's what predators do. They eat your house from the inside. Trigger. Step 5. The witness who wasn't supposed to exist. The vice principal's refusal to sign Ashley's medical authorization became another anchor. Hartley's statement was recorded. The form was photocopied. Ashley's attempt was dated. And the timing mattered, because it showed Ashley didn't just want me punished. She wanted documentation. A paper trail that could support a narrative of instability. Elise explained it to me slowly. If you're labeled unfit, she said, then adults can petition for control. Control of decisions, control of finances, control of where you live. Marissa added, and once a system file says at risk in the wrong way, some people use that language like a weapon. I felt sick. Because at 15, You don't know how easy it is for adults to write you into a corner. You don't know how quickly the word help can become a cage. That was the moment it stopped feeling like survival and started feeling like war. Not yelling war, paper war, record war, a war fought with receipts and timestamps and signatures. Elise pulled the chain together in front of me, Ashley withdrawing cash on camera, Tyler picking up the medication, logged and signed, burner phone purchased 2 weeks in advance, linked to the same store, a medical authorization attempt at school the next morning, shifting statements from my father, and burner messages referencing the bag, CPS, and my trust fund. Each piece made the next piece heavier, and by day 3, even my father's confidence began to crack, not because he suddenly cared about me, but because the system was no longer listening to his voice alone. The moment the case turned, Officer Ruiz told us there would be another interview with my father, formal this time, recorded. Elise insisted on being present. Before we went, she looked at me. "Chloe," she said gently, "this part is hard because we're not just proving Ashley and Tyler acted, we're proving your father enabled it." I swallowed. "He'll say he didn't know." Karen's voice was firm. "Then we show him what they said when they thought he was a tool." Officer Ruiz entered the interview room first, Elise beside her. My father sat across the table, arms crossed, face tight and righteous like he'd practiced in the mirror. Richard Bennett, my father, looked tired and furious at the same time. He started the way he always did when confronted with consequences. He made himself the victim. "This is out of control," he snapped. "My daughter has issues. Everyone knows it. I tried to help her. Now you're acting like I'm the criminal." Elise didn't flinch. "We're acting like we need facts," she said. "Your story has changed 3 times." My father scoffed. I was in shock. Officer Ruiz slid a paper across the table. "Then explain the code," she said calmly. My father's mouth opened, closed. Elise slid another paper. "Explain Tyler's 8:30 p.m. claim," she said, voice even. Chloe was already outside. "Hospital intake confirms that." My father's eyes flicked, annoyance deepening. Tyler was confused. Officer Ruiz slid another sheet. "Explain the pharmacy pickup log," she said. "Tyler signed for your medication." My father blinked fast. He helps our family." Karen had warned me. My father didn't like complexity. And now complexity was piling up in front of him like a wall. Elise's voice remained controlled. "Richard," she said, "we're going to ask you one more time. Did Chloe steal from you?" My father leaned forward, face flushed. "Yes." Officer Ruiz watched him for a beat. Then she slid one final image across the table. A still frame from the ATM footage, Ashley at the machine. My father stared at it. At first, his face didn't register what he was seeing. Then his brows pulled together. Then his mouth parted slightly. This isn't," he started. Elise didn't raise her voice. "That's your daughter Ashley," she said, "withdrawing cash, multiple times, on multiple dates." Silence. My father's hands tightened on the edge of the table. A small tremor moved through his jaw. And for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in my father's face when it came to Ashley. Doubt. Not enough. But the first hairline crack. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a turn. And it was right here, right as the procedural chain started to bite, that Elise leaned toward me later and said something I didn't expect. "We haven't even shown him the burner messages." My stomach dropped. "Why not?" Elise's expression was sharp. "Because once we show him those, he can't pretend anymore, and people do dangerous things when their denial is stripped." Officer Ruiz nodded. "We're timing it. Even the confrontation had a timeline, and I realized this wasn't just about proving Ashley guilty. It was about preventing her next move, because she still had access to my father. She still had his ear, and Tyler still had his smooth voice and his nice kid mask. If we moved too slowly, they'd rewrite the story again. If we moved too fast, they'd destroy what we hadn't found yet. And that's when Officer Ruiz said the words that made my stomach tighten. "There are deleted messages on the burner." Deleted, but not gone. The forensic tech believed they could recover them. The ones Ashley didn't want anyone to see. The ones that would show intent like a spotlight. The ones that might include the exact plan for the trust fund. And, most importantly, the ones that explained why the police called my father that night and said something that turned his face white as a ghost. If this story is hitting close to home, I hope you'll stick around because what happens next is worth every second. Drop a like if you're rooting for me. It means the world. Because what came next wasn't just a discovery. It was the smoking gun. The message Ashley thought she'd erased. The message that wouldn't just prove she framed me. It would prove she tried to take my future, on purpose. And once my father heard it, there would be no more pretending, no more misunderstanding, no more help, only consequences. At the end of that week, Elise told me there would be a formal hearing. Not a full trial yet, but an official proceeding where CPS, law enforcement, and the court would decide custody, safety, and next steps. And Elise said it like a promise. We're going to present the evidence in sequence. Sequence, step by step, so no one could talk their way around it. Officer Ruiz looked at Karen, then at me. We're ready, she said, as soon as Tech pulls the recovered texts. Karen's voice was calm, almost gentle. That's the moment, she said. That's the line that makes him go white. And that night, in my placement bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something that made my throat tighten with equal parts fear and relief. For the first time, Ashley wasn't controlling the story. The story was about to read itself, out loud, word for word, in a room full of adults who couldn't be charmed, and Ashley Reynolds was about to learn what happens when your own words become evidence. The hearing was set for Monday morning. Not a dramatic courthouse staircase with reporters and flashing cameras, just a family court building that smelled like old paper and disinfectant, where people whispered because everyone in the hallway was carrying something fragile. I sat on a hard bench outside the room with Elise Parker beside me, her folder thick with exhibits, dates, receipts, screenshots, logs. Karen Holloway stood a few feet away like a guard dog in a blazer. Officer Ruiz leaned against the wall, quiet, eyes scanning the hall. Marissa Grant arrived with another CPS worker and a stack of forms, and then, like the air itself stiffened, my father walked in. Richard Bennett. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, emotionally, like a man who'd spent a week insisting the world was wrong and was now entering a room that didn't care about his insistence. Ashley came in right behind him. Perfect hair, light makeup, a cardigan that said, "I'm harmless." Her eyes were already shiny, like she'd timed the tears in advance. Tyler Brooks followed, hand on the small of her back, the supportive boyfriend mask polished and ready. When Ashley spotted me, her face did something subtle, so subtle no one else would notice. A flicker of irritation, not fear, not remorse. I saw it because I'd lived with her long enough to recognize the truth underneath her expressions. Then her mouth softened, her brows lifted, and she became concerned sister again. "Chloe," she breathed, as if saying my name hurt her. I didn't answer. Elise leaned in and murmured, "You don't engage. You let the evidence speak." Evidence. That word was my oxygen now. We entered the room. A judge sat at the front. Judge Harold Weaver, silver hair, reading glasses, a tired face that had probably watched too many families break in predictable ways. A court reporter clicked keys. A clerk called the matter. Everyone stood, then sat. My father's attorney spoke first, trying to frame it as a troubled teen crisis, full of soft language and excuses. Ashley dabbed at her eyes. Tyler looked down, solemn. My father nodded along as if he was the one who'd been harmed. It was almost convincing, until you remembered an October storm doesn't care about convincing. Judge Weaver listened without interrupting, hands folded. Then he looked at Elise. "Ms. Parker," he said, "your response." Elise stood, calm, professional. She didn't start with emotion. She started with time. "Your Honor," she said, "this case turns on a procedural sequence. We will present evidence in a step-by-step chain, each step corroborated by record, timestamp, or witness." Judge Weaver nodded slightly. "Proceed." Elise opened her folder, and the room changed. Step 1. The timeline. Elise presented school records. Chloe Bennett was removed from class at 3:12 p.m. on the day in question, she said. Vice Principal Hartley confirms her father, Richard Bennett, collected her. She handed a copy to the clerk. Then she presented hospital intake. Chloe arrived at the ER at 10:06 p.m. with symptoms consistent with prolonged exposure to cold and rain. Elise didn't say hypothermia like a dramatic word. She said it like a diagnosis. Judge Weaver's eyes narrowed slightly. The weather conditions. Marissa Grant stood and supplied the report. Temperature was 38 degrees with significant rainfall and wind, she said. Judge Weaver looked at my father. Mr. Bennett, he said, voice even. Is it your position that your minor child left the home voluntarily without adequate clothing in those conditions? My father opened his mouth. Ashley's hand tightened around a tissue. Tyler shifted. My father's attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, Mr. Bennett believed the child was safe. He believed she had... Elise cut in gently. He believed she had a coat, Your Honor. Judge Weaver's gaze sharpened. Did she? Elise didn't answer with a speech. She held up a photo, taken at the ER, of my soaked hoodie, my bare arms, my thin shoes. No, Your Honor. A beat of silence. Judge Weaver wrote something down. Step 2. The shifting story, Officer Ruiz testified to the inconsistencies. Coat, backpack, ran away versus kicked out. Judge Weaver didn't look impressed. Mr. Bennett, the judge said, why has your account changed? My father's jaw tightened. I was in shock. Elise's voice was polite. Shock doesn't explain Tyler Brooks' statement. Judge Weaver glanced at Tyler. Mr. Brooks, he said, you claimed you saw Chloe steal cash and medication at 8:30 p.m., correct? Tyler straightened, mask on. Yes, Your Honor. Elise stepped forward. Chloe was already outside for hours by that time, she said. We have corroboration from hospital and witness. How do you reconcile that? Tyler's eyes flicked to Ashley for a fraction of a second. Ashley's face remained sympathetic. Tyler cleared his throat. It could have been earlier. I wasn't looking at a clock. Judge Weaver's voice stayed mild, but his eyes turned cold. You were certain enough to give a specific time. Tyler swallowed. I guessed, he said. The court reporter's keys clicked, a specific lie becoming permanent ink. Venue for Step 3. The camera and the cash. Elise moved on without gloating. Your Honor, she said, the cash theft allegation collapses under camera evidence. She submitted the ATM footage, stills and bank withdrawal logs, Ashley at the machine, dates, times, amounts. Ashley's face went very still, not shocked, calculating. My father's head tilted as he stared at the image as if he could deny what his own eyes were seeing. Judge Weaver looked down at the still frame, then up at Ashley. Ms. Reynolds, he said calmly. Is that you? Ashley's voice was soft. Your Honor, Elise didn't let it become theater. We have multiple instances, she said. Not one. A pattern. Judge Weaver's pen moved again. My father's attorney started to speak Yichu, but stopped Key, like he'd stepped into a hole. Ashley dabbed at her eyes again, late now, less effective. Step 4. The medication access. Elise presented the pharmacy pickup log. Tyler Brooks signed for Richard Bennett's medication, she said. Date and time recorded. Signature captured. Tyler's face tightened. Judge Weaver asked, why were you collecting prescription medication for Mr. Bennett? Tyler's voice stayed smooth. I was helping. Mr. Bennett asked me. Judge Weaver looked at my father. Did you? My father's jaw clenched. Yes. Judge Weaver's eyes narrowed. Then you gave Mr. Brooks access to your medication. Medication later used in an allegation against your minor child. My father didn't answer. Because there wasn't a good answer. Elise paused. Not for drama. For the next door. And then she said, now we move to the device. Ashley's spine went straighter. Tyler's hand twitched at his side. My father's head turned slightly, as if he already sensed the cliff edge. Officer Ruiz presented the evidence bag with the burner phone and the chain of custody paperwork. Found in Ashley Reynolds' bedroom, Ruiz stated. Unlocked, preserved, forensically extracted. Judge Weaver's gaze sharpened. Ms. Reynolds, he said, why do you possess an unregistered prepaid phone? Ashley's breath hitched, perfectly timed. I don't know. Tyler. Tyler's head snapped slightly. What? Ashley blinked rapidly. I mean, I didn't buy it. I don't even use it. I didn't. Elise lifted a hand. Your Honor, she said, we will not speculate. We will read the messages. Ashley's tears stopped, completely, as if someone had turned off a switch. That was the moment I knew she understood. Because you can cry through allegations. You can cry through suspicion. You can't cry through your own words. The recovered text, the forensic tech wasn't present, but the extraction report was. Elise handed copies to the clerk. Then she looked at Judge Weaver. Your Honor, she said, with the court's permission, I will read an excerpt relevant to motive and coordination. Judge Weaver nodded once. Proceed. Elise's voice was steady as she read. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. Ashley Reynolds to contact saved as T, time-stamped 2 weeks before the storm. Got the phone. We do it the week he's busy. He'll believe it. Tyler's face drained slightly. Elise continued. Night of the storm. Bag is ready. He's already mad. Just keep saying help. My father's head turned sharply toward Ashley. Ashley stared straight ahead. Elise read the next one, and the air in the room changed again. Heavy, irreversible. Once she's labeled unstable, the trust is easy. 55 grand. Don't mess this up. The words hung there. 55 grand. My trust fund, said out loud in a courtroom. Judge Weaver's gaze lifted slowly to Ashley, then to Tyler, then to my father. My father's mouth opened a fraction, and his face went white as a ghost, not metaphorically, not, he looked pale. His skin actually lost color, as if his blood had decided to flee, because in that second he realized the truth wasn't just that Chloe didn't steal. The truth was that he had been used, and worse, he had helped them. Elise didn't stop. Next message, she said. Time-stamped after Chloe was removed from the home. Try the school. Get the authorization. If she can't talk, we win. Ashley's hands clenched so tightly around her tissue, it ripped. Tyler swallowed hard. Judge Weaver's voice was quiet. Miss Reynolds, he said, do you deny writing these messages? Ashley finally turned her head, eyes wide, but not with sorrow, with panic. Your Honor, I don't, someone could have. Judge Weaver's gaze didn't soften. This is a forensic extraction from a device found in your room. Ashley's lips parted, and nothing came out. Tyler's nice kid mask cracked. His leg bounced under the table. My father's attorney leaned in and whispered urgently to him, but my father didn't move. He just stared at Ashley like he was seeing her for the first time. And in that stare, I saw the collapse of an entire family myth. Golden child, perfect daughter, good boyfriend, all of it, gone. The consequence in the room, Judge Weaver didn't shout. He didn't slam a gavel like TV. He spoke in that calm tone that means the decision is already made. Chloe Bennett will remain out of the Bennett residence pending further proceedings, he said. CPS is granted continued protective supervision. Mr. Bennett's custodial rights are suspended pending investigation. My father flinched as if struck. Ashley made a choked sound. Judge Weaver continued, eyes on Officer Ruiz. Law enforcement is directed to pursue criminal investigation into fraud, false reporting, and any attempt to access the minor's financial assets. Officer Ruiz nodded once. Elise closed her folder softly. Karen's hand found my shoulder, steady and warm, and for a moment, the room felt like it had shifted under my feet, like the world had been rearranged into a shape where my sister's performance couldn't outrun the truth. Ashley's attorney started speaking quickly, damage control, but Judge Weaver raised a hand. No, he said simply. Enough. That single word cut through everything. Enough. Enough tears. Enough excuses. Enough help used as a weapon. My father didn't look at me when the judge spoke. He couldn't. Because if he looked at me, he'd have to face the fact that he shoved his 15-year-old daughter into a storm for $55,000 he didn't even own. And his face stayed white. The sentence from the police that night, the one I never heard, finally made sense. It wasn't, we found your daughter. It was, we found a minor in hypothermic distress, and your story doesn't match the facts. It was the first crack. The courtroom was the collapse. When the hearing ended, Ashley stood up too fast, chair scraping. Her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for an exit that didn't exist. Tyler avoided everyone's gaze. My father remained seated for a moment, shoulders slumped, staring at the table like it held the ghost of the man he thought he was. Elise touched my arm. "You did it," she whispered. "You survived long enough for the truth to have a witness." I exhaled shakily, but as we walked out into the hallway, I felt something strange, something I didn't expect. Not triumph, a hollow ache, because the next part wasn't about proving what they did. It was about living with what it meant, and that meant going back to the present, 13 years later, back to Boston, back to my apartment, back to the envelope on my floor, back to my father's letter, because now you understand why that letter matters. Not because it can undo the past, because it reveals what's left when consequences finally catch up. And in the final block, I would decide whether I wanted closure, or a boundary so clean it felt like mercy. 13 years later, that letter sat on my kitchen table in Boston like a live wire. I read it again the next morning, then again that night, as if repetition could change what it said. "I'm not well. They moved me into a facility. I can't stop thinking about what I did. There are things I never told the police. Please, let me explain. I had built a life that didn't include him, a job where my name meant competence, not suspicion, friends who knew me as steady, not unstable, an apartment I paid for with my own money, in a city where no one knew the story unless I chose to tell it. I had made my pain quiet and useful, and still, one envelope could drag me back to a porch light and a deadbolt. Karen Holloway's card was still in my wallet all those years later, creased, faded, but intact. I hadn't called her in a long time, not because I forgot her, because I didn't want to reopen the file inside my chest, but the letter did it anyway. So I called. She answered on the second ring like she still expected me. "Chloe?" she said, and her voice was older now, but instantly familiar, steady, grounded. "Is everything okay?" I exhaled. "He wrote to me," I said. A pause, then, "Your father." "Yes." Karen didn't ask why. She didn't ask what he wanted. She asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want?" I stared out my window at Boston traffic, people crossing streets with coffee cups, living ordinary lives. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to slam the door back. Part of me wants to see him. Just once. To end it." Karen's voice softened. "Ending it doesn't require giving him access to you," she said. "It requires you deciding where the boundary is." Boundary. That word was the difference between closure and reopening an old wound. "I'm scared I'll feel sorry for him," I whispered. Karen's answer was immediate. "Feeling sorry isn't the same as forgetting." I swallowed hard. Then Karen said something that made my skin prickle. "If you go on your terms. You choose the place. You choose the time. You choose the exit." My hands tightened around my mug. "He's in a facility," Karen hummed softly, thinking. "Then you don't meet him alone. You tell staff you want a monitored visit. You don't discuss money. You don't sign anything. You don't accept one more favor." I almost laughed at the bitterness of it. "You really think he'd try to pull something?" Karen's voice stayed calm. "I think people who spent years surviving their own choices don't always change. Sometimes they just run out of places to hide." That was the thing about time. It doesn't transform everyone. It just reveals them. 2 weeks later, I was back in my hometown for the first time in over a decade. The facility sat on a quiet road lined with bare trees, winter light, gray sky, the kind of stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. A TV played too loudly in the common area. An aide guided me to a small visitation room with a table bolted to the floor. I sat with my hands folded, waiting. My heart didn't race the way it used to. It beat slowly, like it was bracing. Then the door opened, and my father stepped in. Richard Bennett looked older than old. His hair was thin, his shoulders slumped. He moved carefully, as if his body had become something he didn't trust. But it wasn't his age that hit me. It was his eyes. For the first time in my life, He looked like a man who knew he was not the hero of his own story. He stopped when he saw me, as if he didn't believe I was real. "Chloe," he whispered. I didn't stand. I didn't walk into his arms. I didn't perform forgiveness. I nodded once. He sat down slowly, hands trembling, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." I watched his mouth form the words and felt nothing warm rise to meet them. "Why did you write to me?" I asked. Straight to the point. No softness. My father's lips parted. I didn't know if I'd get another chance," he said. "That's not an answer," I said calmly. His face flinched slightly. "I had learned something over the years. If you keep the tone steady, people can't accuse you of being emotional. They can't use your reaction to distract from their actions. So I stayed steady." He swallowed. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I'm sorry for that night. I'm sorry for everything." I held his gaze. Apologies don't change the record. His eyes filled, and I felt a flash of the old impulse. Comfort him, soften, make it easier. That impulse was a reflex from childhood, a survival habit. I didn't obey it. My father nodded weakly. I know. He looked down at his hands. I was wrong. I leaned forward slightly. "No," I said. "You chose." The words landed like a clean strike. His shoulders sagged. "Yes," he whispered. "I chose." Silence stretched. Then he said, "Ashley ruined us." I felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. "Don't," I said. "Don't put this on her alone." He blinked at me. "But she planned it," I said. "Tyler helped. But you were the one who shoved me into that storm. You were the one who locked the door. You were the one who lied to the police. You were the one who tried to label me an addict so they could take what wasn't theirs." My father's face went pale again. Not the dramatic courtroom pale, the helpless pale of a man who has nowhere to hide. His mouth trembled. "I didn't understand," he said. "At the time, you didn't want to understand," I said quietly, "because understanding would mean admitting you were wrong about your favorite daughter." His eyes squeezed shut. I watched him breathe through it. Then he whispered, "I lost custody because of it." "Yes," I said. "I lost my job," he said, voice breaking. People looked at me like I was a monster." I didn't flinch. "Because you acted like one." The room went still. The aide outside the door shifted slightly, as if listening. My father's tears slipped down his cheeks. "I deserve that," he said. I didn't say it was okay. I didn't say I forgave him. Instead, I asked the question the letter had dangled like a hook. "You said there were things you never told the police," I said. "What things?" My father wiped his face with shaking hands. After you were removed," he said, "Ashley came to me with papers." My stomach tightened. Even after all these years, what kind of papers? He swallowed. "Trust paperwork. She said she could help manage it while you were gone." My hands clenched once, then relaxed. "And what did you do?" His eyes filled again. "I signed something," he whispered. A slow, hot anger moved through me. "Did it work?" I asked, voice controlled. He shook his head. "No, the hold was already placed. The bank called. They asked why I was trying to move funds. They asked questions." He stared at me. "That's when the police called me that night. Not to tell me you were alive." My breath caught. He continued, voice cracking. "They called because the bank flagged suspicious activity. They called because the story wasn't matching the records. And then they told me you were in the hospital." There it was, the sentence. The real reason his face went white. Not my survival, the exposure. A machine he couldn't control. Bank flags, timestamps, systems had turned its headlights on him the same way Karen's car had turned its headlights on me. He looked down. "I didn't tell them I signed," he admitted. "I was ashamed. I was scared. I felt my pulse slow, clarity sharpening. So you wrote to me," I said, "because you want to confess now that you're dying." My father's shoulders shook. "I want to make it right," he whispered. I held his gaze. "You can't make it right," I said. "You can only stop making it worse." His eyes widened slightly, hopeful. I didn't let that hope grow. This is what I'm going to give you, I said calmly. One visit, this conversation, the truth, spoken out loud. And then I leave. His mouth opened. Chloe, please? No, I said, and my voice didn't shake. You don't get to ask for more. You already took more than you were entitled to. He stared at me, tears shining. I don't hate you, I said, and that surprised even me. But I don't trust you, and I don't owe you comfort. A long silence. Then he nodded, like he finally understood the shape of my boundary. Do you forgive me? He whispered. I took a breath. The room smelled like antiseptic and old regret. Outside, the winter light pressed against the blinds, and I realized forgiveness wasn't a gift you hand out because someone asks nicely. It's something that lives inside you or doesn't on your own timeline. So I answered honestly, I'm not here to forgive you, I said. I'm here to release myself. His face crumpled, but I wasn't cruel about it. I stood slowly, smoothing my coat, body calm. I looked down at him. I survived, I said. I rebuilt. I became someone you don't get to claim. He nodded, tears falling. And for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as my father, not as a villain, just as a man who made a choice and spent the rest of his life paying for it. I walked to the door. My hand rested on the handle, and I said the final thing I needed him to hear. You taught me something in that storm, I said quietly. Not who you were. He looked up. Who I am. Then I left. No dramatic slam. Just a clean exit. A boundary. A life. Back in Boston, my apartment felt warmer than it ever had. Not because the heat was on, because I had done the one thing 15-year-old me couldn't do that night. I chose the door. I chose when it opened, and I chose when it closed. I kept Karen Holloway's card in my wallet, not as a reminder of pain, as proof that sometimes a stranger becomes the first person to tell you the truth. Something is wrong here, and it's not you. And if you survive long enough, the truth becomes paperwork, timestamps, receipts, a staircase of evidence that no one can talk their way around. And when that staircase reaches the top, the people who tried to erase you realize too late. You were never the problem. You were the proof. Thanks so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.